Hello, and thanks for reviewing the following presentation given during the 2020 Data Science Symposium webinar series. The Data Science Symposium is one of several services provided by the University of Cincinnati's Center for Business Analytics, a part of the Lindner College of Business. Through leadership forums, student projects, public education events, including the Data Science Symposium and the Analytics Summit this spring, as well as professional development courses, the center provides businesses and organizations with game-changing capabilities to drive analytics for competitive advantage, regardless of size or type of organization you represent. For more information about the center, including how to join our 25 member organizations and the benefits they enjoy, please contact either myself or Dr. Michael Fry here at UC. Now, enjoy the following presentation.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. So we are representing three companies here. So Kroger, 8451, and SEI Consulting. And we're going to be talking about how we've modeled the digital customer behavior during COVID. So we have Reid McCreary, he's from the Digital Customer Insights team at 8451. Rob Dodd, who's from the same team over at 8451. And myself, Dan Shah, I'm from SEI Consulting, and my client is Kroger Digital. Kroger Digital BI. So who we are, so three companies all headquartered in Cincinnati. So Kroger is the largest US supermarket by revenue. 8451 is a data science and customer experience company, and SEI provides business and technology consulting. So what do we mean by the digital customer? So a digital customer for Kroger is anyone that engages in shopping with Kroger through a digital medium. So they could be in-store shopping with the app to help them find products or using some of our in-store products within the app. They could also be shopping one of the e-commerce platforms online like Kroger Pickup, which we'll talk about more in depth later. Kroger's digital customer has changed quite a bit during the COVID pandemic. So we've seen an increased demand from customers. We've seen an influx of new customers coming in. There's also been a change of buying habits, and we'll talk all about this later in the presentation. So the key question for us is how do we stay current with what the customer expectations are and ensure that we're building the right experience and prioritizing the right components of our product line. So what we'll cover today, so Reid will start us off and he'll jump into how COVID forced us to press pause and rethink our methodologies. Rob then will cover how specifically we rethought methodology for determining causality. And then I'll finish this off with talking about how we've modeled the customer dynamic specifically with Kroger Pickup.
Awesome, thanks, Dan. At Kroger, we've noticed a rapid evolution of customer expectations and have created a portfolio of value propositions to provide the what, when, and where that customers need. This portfolio itself is evolving as well with constant testing of new iterations of modality and fulfillment models. The dominant customer options today, which you can see here, include a mix of brick and mortar, pickup, delivery, and ship, allowing our customers to determine how they want to receive their groceries based on convenience, assortment, timing, and price. At 8451, we ultimately use a customer lens to perform data analytics with both behavioral and attitudinal data in order to deliver the right insights to execute, measure, and improve upon the digital customer experience. So let me give you a quick example within the curbside pickup space. If you think about the end-to-end customer experience within Pickup, there are a multitude of components to get right in order to create that great experience that customers want and expect. We are constantly gathering attitudinal data on this front by surveying our customers on their grocery pickup experiences. And at 8451, we're able to combine this data with actual customer behaviors, allowing us to not only understand what customers tell us, but also what they do in our stores. Correlating customer feedback to declining sales metrics, for instance, gives us a lens into the experience, allowing us to match churn behavior to attitudinal feedback on the experience. And that ultimately helps the team prioritize and fund the experience areas that matter most to customers. Now, let's shift gears and talk a bit about Kroger during the pandemic. In March of 2020, COVID-19 forced us at Kroger to press pause, take stock, and rethink everything in order to add value to our customers during an unprecedented time. First of all, we asked ourselves, are we prepared? And luckily, in many ways, we were. By February of 2020, we had expanded our digital e-commerce coverage to 97% of our customer base, meaning that 97% of our customers had a nearby pickup option or a Kroger delivery option within their zip code. We were also set up in a way that increasing our e-commerce capacity at the store level was not only feasible, but could be done quickly. And finally, with a new and urgent need for e-commerce, we knew that removing fee was the right thing to do for customers. We had spent the year prior testing a feeless model, both at a targeted level and at scale, giving us the order economics learnings that allowed us to remove fee as an urgent response for our customers. Beyond this, COVID had us rethinking our business questions, market tests, and insight methodologies. So a few examples here. As far as business questions are concerned, we started asking, how do we focus less on customer trial and more on maintaining new customers? How do we modify our experiences and assortment to better fit customer emerging needs? And what customer trends are emerging, and how should Kroger be reacting to those trends? As far as considerations of test and learns, we had some new questions we're asking ourselves. For instance, does this store have the capability and capacity to take on my test right now, considering the pandemic? Is my test informing a decision for a post-pandemic timeframe? And are the customer's feelings and actions of this test likely to be different due to COVID-19? When we think about the methodologies used to measure test, there are some new questions as well. For instance, is my benchmark reliant on past customer behavior? With surge differences across cities and states, are my geographies for my test comparable anymore? And do I need to wait for behavior to stabilize for my methodology to be effective? I'm now going to pass the presentation over to Rob for a further example here.
Thanks, Reid, for teeing that up. So I'm going to speak about a same-store measurement methodology called Causal impact. Causal is a flexible store-level methodology to understand incrementality while allowing for lower execution risk versus some older traditional methodologies like INCOVA. I believe all data scientists should, at a minimum, consider trying Causal if they find themselves needing to measure the incremental effect on sales, units, visits, or any other target metric for that matter. At 8451, we take pride in measuring the effects from in-store changes such as these that you see on your screen. Aisle design, navigation, assortment changes, packaging changes, in-store marketing activities like signage, promotion activities, operational changes. I think a good example comes to mind, like measuring the impact on associate picker speeds with new technology. The list is quite long and it speaks to the flexibility of Causal. So if you're someone who wants to understand how a change drives incrementality with statistical significance, give Causal a shot. Over the past few years, Causal has become the controlled store testing methodology of choice for 8451. And part of this has to do with what I would consider an overlooked benefit of the methodology, namely that you can get that statistical significance by using fewer stores. And why is that important? It reduces the risk of a change in store going wrong. Instead of coordinating a change across 20 stores, the execution team only has to coordinate a change across, say, 5 stores, for example. Less risk of the test going sideways and creating unusable results. Sounds pretty great, right? Go to that next slide. So what is causal impact? Causal is a Bayesian structural time series model. And to vastly oversimplify it, the model looks at prior examples and data to form posterior probabilities. Again, said differently, it creates a synthetic control that mimics how the test store would behave given no change or no treatment. But how does it work? First, you build the synthetic control. Sales data or whatever target metric you choose from a 1 to 3 year pre-period is evaluated to develop a synthetic control that most closely matches the testing environment. and utilizing at least 1 year of pre-period data ensures that post-test measurement accounts for things like seasonality and general category trends. A general rule of thumb, more data is better. Second, generate expected test store sales, or units, or visits, again, whatever metric you're targeting. Test period data in the control stores and pre-period relationships between your test and your control stores are combined to calculate a synthetic control. That synthetic control should be thought of as the expected sales of test stores in the test period, had there been no change in the store. It's essentially a counterfactual. Compare the synthetic, and finally, compare the synthetic control to the actual test results. So in the case where a target metric is sales, actual test store sales are compared to the expected sales forecast, or the synthetic control. That difference in performance between the test store and the synthetic control is the uplift, or the incrementality. And that's all there is to it. Create a synthetic control group that acts like the test stores given no change, and compare actual results versus synthetic control. Let's go ahead and next. So now that you have a conceptual understanding of how causal works and knowing that it relies on past behavior to predict expected test store behavior, and considering we're living through a time that would be considered anything but predictable, I would like to introduce some principles to consider and suggested tools to mitigate risk when executing a same-store test in the middle of a pandemic. Ask yourself some of these questions, like, is the intention to use this test to make decisions about future time periods when we're not in a pandemic? Does the test involve an area of the store where physical contact or distance is relevant? Is the test in a product group that is impacted by spikes in demand or increased likelihood of supply issues? Think hand sanitizer or paper towels. In addition to these considerations, I've highlighted a few courses of actions you can take. Increasing the length of test, for example, or simply just waiting for customers or products to stabilize. I can attest to filling this out early on during the shutdown for an assortment test. And ultimately, after completing this exercise, we ended up recommending to press pause on the test and eventually increase the length of the test to allow the customer behavior to further stabilize it. All of that said, though, the key takeaway here is that you should consider crafting principles to guide you during these unusual circumstances. Next. Okay.
Feel free to start whenever you want.
Okay. So to recap, try causal and be safe out there. If you need to understand incrementality through controlled store tests, consider causal impact for all the reasons highlighted, namely its flexibility of capturing statistical significance with a fewer number of stores. Second, causal impact allows you to capture uplift by measuring the difference of actual results from a synthetic control, or your expected test store sales. And when testing during a pandemic, consider crafting a set of principles that will allow you to keep learning while keeping everyone safe. Thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity. And I'll hand it over to Dan to talk through some of the exciting work he's.
Thanks, Rob. We'll shift gears here a little bit and talk about customer dynamics within Kroger Pickup. Quick refresher on what Kroger Pickup is. It's the largest e-commerce modality within Kroger, and it allows the customer to place their order online, pick a time slot in the future, the order is picked for them, and then the customer goes and picks up that order. So it's a contactless way to pick up your groceries, and as you can imagine, during COVID, it's become quite popular. So first, I'm going to talk about 3 case studies within Kroger Pickup. The first is enabling availability of Kroger Pickup, how we modeled the customer experience, and then the last piece is how we've automated insights for questions around the Kroger Pickup experience. One of the challenges early on is that we had more demand than capacity for Kroger Pickup, and we needed a platform to be able to make decisions about where can we allocate pickup capacity. There was limited data, and the data wasn't updated at the frequency needed to make decisions. So our first step, the most critical step, was to sit with our with the decision makers, our partners, and try to understand what information was needed for that decision making and when was the solution needed by. Two questions came out of this. The first is they needed to understand which stores could handle more capacity per their design. And the second was, how fast are these time slots filling up? Are they filling up hours in advance or days in advance? And are the orders surging when they fill up, or are they filling up at certain times of the day? So we iterated on these questions and came up with proof of concept that would enable these decision makers to act quickly. We developed the engineering of the data and also validated the numbers that we were putting in front of these decision makers, and then deployed and iterated quickly on the Power BI platform using the usage statistic to try to understand who is using it and improve the reporting. So the output, is not some sophisticated predictive model of where capacity was needed, because that wouldn't have met our time requirements. But it's development of new KPIs, which enabled safe shopping for millions of customers at Kroger. Once we could satisfy that demand, we saw some changing dynamics for the customer. We saw that new customers were coming into the funnel, that existing customers were changing their shopping habits. We saw different responses to supply chain complexities in terms of customers coming back. So how do we stay current with the customer expectations and ensure that we're focusing on the building and innovating on the right parts of the Kroger Pickup experience? There's a lot to an order. I mean, there's the customer loyalty with Kroger. How long have they been with digital? And also, like, what is their transaction experience look like? Do they sit and wait in the parking lot for a short period of time? And also with their order, did we fulfill it exactly as ordered, or do we have to substitute because of out of stock? So we developed a predictive model for customer retention, looking and specifically studying the fulfillment of the order. So if there were substitutes, if there were items that could not be substituted, how did that impact retention? We also looked at the customer pickup history to see how that played into fulfillment. And then finally, we looked at store characteristics, like, is this the same store that the customer normally shops at in store? The findings were interesting. So there was definitely an interaction between the pickup history of the customer and their reaction to out of stock. We found that new customers were more sensitive to out of stock than if a customer already had experience with pickup. We also found that customers were more willing to accept substitutions than out of stock during the COVID timing. And we finally looked at relative versus absolute measures. And we found that in some cases, absolute measures were better predictors of retention versus relative, meaning what percentage of their order was substituted. So these were important findings. The last one fed into how we revise or how are we thinking about our KPIs today. For the data scientists out there, here's a list of the models we looked at. We ended up using a generalized additive model because the computation time is limited. It captured the nonlinear effects of our dependent variables very well, and it's very interpretable. The next steps for this model are to try to discriminate the items in the basket. So today we use an item missing as an item missing, but what if it's from a certain commodity? And we also want to look at how expensive that item is, time of day influencers, and wait time. Shifting gears again a little bit, I want to talk about cancellations for pickup and how we automated insights. So an order for pickup can be canceled, and this can be costly to Kroger, especially if the order is already picked, but also can be an indicator of something that's wrong with the experience. They can be driven by quite a few different things. The top right example shows that pickup capacity, like not being able to actually get a same day or next day order, was driving cancellations. In the bottom right, this is a case of a second spike in COVID cases in Houston. The basket composition, which is comprised mainly of sanitation products, was really tied to cancellations. But exploring and vetting out these hypotheses takes time. We also are curious at different aggregations, which stores were impacted, which divisions of stores were impacted. So what we did from there was develop a top-down and bottom-up approach for how we can predict how we can understand which independent variables are influencing cancellations. So we had quite a few factors that we put into the model. And in the top left, you can see from a management perspective, they can see which variables are influencing cancellations. So this is a variable importance plot. The bottom left chart shows unsupervised learning to compare divisions. So which divisions are similar and seeing those same impacts or similar impacts that are driving cancellations. Now, if I'm a store manager, I might just be curious about my specific store. Lime allows us to see which variables are influencing a specific store based on the model on the left side. So that's the top right chart. And then if the store manager wants to see, well, if I change this independent variable by this much, how would it impact cancellations? So they can know how much time to invest in correcting potential influencers of cancellations. So where do we go from here? The first step is we want to create some operating strategy around our predictive models. So we have many features that go into our models. How do we track our feature engineering and which models are significant? Also, how do we look at our models in terms of versions and version control? Which data set was used to train a specific model? And beyond that, how have the models evolved over time? So that's some work we have to do. The second piece is how do we share this knowledge more broadly? So creating a knowledge repo where these results are reproducible and the insights are concisely captured and displayed. And then the third piece is creating platforms for automation and alerting. We're looking right now at various ways of productionizing these machine learning models and also creating platforms based on automating alerting to key stakeholders. So those are the three pieces that we're working on in the coming months. And with that, we'll wrap up and turn to Q&A.